have with me Adam Alson, and we were introduced through a mutual friend, Vlad. And today, Adam's going to share with us just a lot about his experience. He has a really varied experience in all sorts of different things. And when we were talking about booking this podcast, he said something really interesting. He gave me the line, "Opportunities are created, not given," which I really, really like. So I'm just going to leave it open for you, Adam. Tell us about how you got started as an entrepreneur and how that led you to where you are today.
Sure. So, in retrospect and hindsight, entrepreneurs are literally born, in my opinion. I don't think it's something that, everybody's programmed to do. For me, I didn't realize early on, even as a kid, that I was an entrepreneur, but I was. I had entrepreneurial tendencies, I should say. I started off, just kind of always interested in, not necessarily commerce, but having fun. And, commerce typically kind of came along for the ride there. So, yeah, I mean, even as a kid, I was creating carnival games on my block. A lot of kids were doing lemonade stands. I wanted to do something different, so I created my own carnival games.
Nice.
And I would literally take stuffed animals that I had, and maybe people had handed down to me, or things I just didn't necessarily care for or sentimentally attached to at the time. And I would literally take a spray gun and draw a target on like a piece of wood, and I would, tell my friends, yeah, sure, for $1 you gotta hit the target there, and then if they hit the target 3 times, or whatever, I would give away a stuffed animal that got, like I said, just kind of had. So like I said, while most kids were doing lemonade stands, I was creating carnival games, and then also too, I did yard sales, things just junk that I didn't necessarily want. I would set up shop, like literally right in front of my parents' house. Move along into like my middle school years. I figured out if you bought a box of blow pops at Costco and then, smuggled them into school and then sold them all day, 5 for $1, you could walk away with like 30, 40 bucks. Nice. And, when you're 10 and 12 years old, that kind of money that's big bucks, man. Like when you roll up to the ice cream man with $30 to $40, you're balling out.
That's right.
You're getting everybody on the block ice cream, like whatever everybody wants. Like you were like it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. So like I said, it was something that was fun for me. I didn't necessarily do it for the money. I did it because it was fun. It was cool to be the guy that always had blow pops on him, like, yeah. Right? Like everybody wanted to be that guy's friend. So it was a lot of fun, and and that wasn't, that was just literally, the entrepreneurism in me poking its head out really early in my life. And again, in hindsight, you don't realize these kinds of things. It's just something that you're compelled to do.
Yeah, I would agree.
Nobody taught me to do that. Nobody told me to do it. It's just something that I identified and I wanted to do because it was fun. It was fun for me. So from there, I was always an artistic kid. I was always into art. I grew up, I was just a pop culture nerd growing up. Like while all my friends were out playing, football on the streets. And don't get me wrong, I played sports too, but not as much as probably the other kids would be out and, playing basketball every day. Like for me, like my fun was, like going through old Ninja Turtle comics and X-Men and, Batman and Spider-Man and Spawn. Like yeah. these were like my passions as a kid. I loved collecting these comics, and really almost not like the storylines are cool. Like obviously the storylines are cool, but the art was just mesmerizing to me. Yeah. And I would just like be enthralled with the idea of like, how do these guys do this? And I would try to draw these comics. I would try to, and I still have my attempts. I still have nice. a book of art, which was pretty good. It wasn't bad. I would definitely get pretty close to the mark. Not bad for a 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. But I knew early on, like, all right, like, because I had friends of mine that were way better than me. Yeah. So I knew I wasn't going to be, drawing comics professionally anytime soon. This is a really funny story. This is how wild I was for art. I had a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine. I'll give him a shout out, Pat Murphy. He's my best friend since childhood. And I slept over his house one day, and his mom had just purchased him a Macintosh, a Pro Performer, I want to say. It was like early days, super early days, and it was set up in his bedroom. And I was, we were supposed to be, playing and hanging out, play video games, whatever. NBA Jam at the time, I think, was big, and we were supposed to be playing that and hanging out. And he showed me this computer, and I was just like, "Whoa, what is this?" You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think I had to be 13 or 12, maybe. I don't remember. But he just showed me this one program on the computer, and the name of the app was KidPix, which was, I don't know if you remember it or if anybody remembers it, but it was like this really super cheesy art program for kids. And I was just like, wait a minute, I could draw on this computer literally with a mouse. So I was like, all right, cool. So I started drawing my Ninja Turtles and everything else that I was kind of into at the time. And then I discovered, wait a minute, there's an animation portion to this app, right? So I figured out you could start animating these drawings that you had, and I was just like, this is off the charts. My mind was blown, because at the time, I was taking my dad's video camera, stealing his camera, unbeknownst to him, because those things were super expensive. Yeah. Those little VHS cameras, mm-hmm. and I would pause and record to create my own animations as a kid, and I would use an eraser to erase my previous art and then draw again. It was crazy. So I was always creating, even making movies with my friends on the block. Creating was just something I needed to do. Again, it wasn't something that anybody told me to do. It was just something I just inherently needed to do. It was just kind of in my DNA: create. And when my dad found out that I was taking the camera, my dad had a really good response to it. He was really cool about it. He was like, oh, cool. I thought he was gonna be mad, but he was very yeah, oh, cool. Go ahead, have fun with it.
Nice.
He wasn't afraid I was going to break it, because he saw how much I cared about it and cared about creating. So it would be in my best interest to make sure everything was in the best possible condition, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I continued to have a lot of fun with that. And then, like I said, I was at my buddy's place, picking back up there, and he saw I was glued to this thing the entire time I was there, and just created more and more and more stuff. And the next morning, my brother was going to pick me up to take me back home. I remember saying, I'm not done with this thing. I didn't want to be parted from it. Yeah. I was like, hey, I know this is crazy, and I know you just got this thing, but would you mind if I borrowed this for the weekend? And you gotta remember, this is not a laptop. This is a big computer, old school CRT monitor with one of these big ass bases that it sat on. It was a big computer back then,
Yeah.
And the screen was teeny, but the screen was big,
Yeah.
And so I was like, would you mind if I borrowed this? And for this reason and this reason alone, or not reason alone, but one of the, this is the impetus of why this guy is my best friend. Without hesitation, he said, sure, just bring it back to me. Whatever, this day. He's like, because he just got it. The guy just got the computer.
That's crazy.
Computer. But God, how awesome of him to say, yeah, I see how much you love it. Have fun with it, and then just bring it back.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. Again, it sucked me in like the mothership. I remember, I'll never forget. I set it up in my parents' living room. I was at the living room, dining room table, the living room table there. And I just literally just sat there for 48 hours on end, just making more and more animations. I just loved it. I loved it so much. And then from there, of course, it's the next natural step. Beg your parents to get a computer for you. Right?
Yeah.
It's come on, are you kidding me right now? And then, of course, computers were super expensive back then. They were really expensive. I think, just to get a basic one was $1,300-$1,400. You got to remember, this is early 90s.
90s money.
This is a big spend back then. So I remember my dad was like, sure, if you do good in school, we'll get you one. And I think at the time I had just graduated middle school. So he got me one. And I ended up, again, just going bananas on this thing and just learning all I possibly could. And the internet wasn't necessarily matured yet, so there really wasn't much to do online, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of like online services, Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL, right? Like it's really it, I believe. And like I said, I was still new in high school, and I remember going into high school one day, and I was hanging out with one of my friends in gym class, and he shows up with like this floppy disk, and he's like you have one of those AOL disks? And I'm like, yeah, I got one of those. He's like take your AOL disk, install AOL, and put this floppy disk in. And he's like you're gonna have a lot of fun. I go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I'm like, what is this? What is this thing? He's like, just trust me, just do it. All right. Okay. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think so. But go ahead.
Because I'm looking at your face. You're kind of like.
It reminds me of the month I spent like $500 in long distance charges on AOL dial-up. So
yeah, you're okay. Interesting. So you know exactly. This is some real hardcore nerdy talk right now.
Exactly.
I hope your audience can handle this.
Yeah.
So so he gives me this floppy disk. I go home. I put the disk in. I obviously made sure, old school, right? So I had to make sure the phone was plugged in, right? And I start up AOL, and I start up this app, and it says Schizo's fake account creator, right? And it's like demonic skull starts animating on the screen. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. It's like something out of a movie, right? Like with these like skeleton like laughing at me with like smoke coming out of its face. I'm like, this is crazy shit, right? I'm like, oh my god, like what's about to happen? And then there's like this little button that says like run or whatever. I can't remember what it said, but it was basically to execute the app. And it said make sure you have your AOL loaded at the same time. So I did. So literally, I hit the button, I hit the go button on it, and the thing just does its thing. AOL starts dialing up, and once it starts it does the whole thing. It's connected, and now you're in that join thing.
Yeah.
And then this app kicks in, the Schizo fake account creator. It's literally auto-populating all these fields, right?
Yeah.
All these fields, whatever. I'm Jane Doe, whatever, fake names, fake addresses, fake phone numbers, and it gets to the next screen. It gets to the credit card information, right? So, again, this is super early days, and real-time credit card transactions hadn't kind of kicked in yet, right. So AOL was still a little stupid, right? It was like you could
take a valid number.
if you were smart enough to figure out what the prefix and the suffix of a real credit card number was, and then kind of just put bullshit in between, like the AOL algorithm that was in place at the time would be fooled into thinking this is a real credit card.
Yeah,
got it. Okay, and then it would create a real account for you.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, literally did its whole thing in like seconds. And then I hear, welcome, remember? Yep. You've got mail. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? It blew my mind. And it's crazy to me that, and I think back at it now and I go, holy shit, the first time I ever logged on to the internet, I basically committed credit card fraud.
Yeah.
That was my first experience online as like a 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid. Yeah. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Now the internet's like, it's just a given, right? Like if you think about it. But as a kid, I had to commit credit card fraud to experience this world, right? That essentially became my career, which is wild, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I was a criminal. I think
everybody with a computer at that age was a criminal. Yeah, let's be honest.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, and then of course I got introduced to these hacker rooms, right? Which because that's the community I kind of came in with. So that's kind of the way you go.
Yeah.
And you find out these private rooms on AOL at the time they were called where's rooms. I'm not sure if you remember these.
Yep.
That's where you'd get all the hacked programs, right?
Yep.
So Photoshop, right? So here's the thing. I mean, and you go back to AOL, and you remember, right? AOL was charged by the hour, right? It was like, what was it, $2.99 an hour?
Yeah,
right? It's something like something ridiculous. Like, think about that. Think about like how much money it would cost you to
be online.
Days.
Yeah,
because we're constantly connected. We're always connected, right?
Yeah.
So literally back then, like I said, it was like online, right? Like what it was back then, it wasn't designed to be something that you're constantly logged into, right? It was supposed to be something you logged onto, you downloaded your emails, and then you logged off.
Yep.
Right? And that was it. That was the experience that was designed for back then. So they figured charging by the hour would be a good model, which eventually fell by the wayside because everyone was like, screw this, we're not doing it anymore, right? But obviously kids like me who figured out a way around the system.
And they're 24 hours a day.
Exactly. We were on there 24 hours a day figuring out what cool programs we can download, right? Yep. So I was on there downloading, like I said, Photoshop, which at the time was, I don't know what, $2,000 program, $1,800 program, super expensive. Like schools bought it, right?
Right.
So, big agencies had the software. I can't imagine, like, studios, right? Yeah. Had the software. Like nobody was really getting into Photoshop because it was just that barrier was too high. That cost barrier was way too high.
Yeah.
So it was only for media professionals, right? And until like jerky kids like me figured out how to
rip it off,
hack it, right? And then we did. And then sure enough, like you would jump into these rooms and say, "Cool, send me Photoshop," right? And then somebody would send it to you in like 10 parts in an email.
I remember those.
Imagine
piece by piece by piece.
Yeah. And you had to download every attachment.
Yep.
RAR, what is it? RAR, like right? Unzip it, whatever.
Yep.
And put them all together, and then you had to literally this program back to put it back together piece by piece.
And hope it worked.
And hope it worked. Right? Right? Like, this is the shit we had to deal with.
Days of downloading.
But here's the thing, kids like myself, and kids that went through this, went through all these hoops to do this shit, that you knew they fucking loved it, right?
Oh, yeah.
You knew they loved it, and what was like, and you knew once we got that app, like we cherished the shit out of it, and we used it all day, every day, practicing and honing our skills, and that's what I did. And then once I got Photoshop, I mean, like I said, like my first experience was this KidPix app, which was like essentially like MS Paint, right? Like
pretty rough.
Like super right, super amateur, right? And then I go to Photoshop and I got airbrushes and I got lightning tools and fire filters and all this other like wild stuff at the time, like super cheesy stuff. If you look back at the art in the 90s for Photoshop art with these like crazy bezels, right? It was like shit's super dated. Yeah. But it was so much fun to be able to do stuff like that, right? It was just a blast. And at the time I was in a band, so that came in handy, right? Creating like my band's cover art and flyers or whatever promotional materials. But again, I just was able to marry my love of art, that I've always had, to the computer. And it was just such a perfect marriage because, like I said, I wasn't the greatest illustrator in the world, but I had a really good eye for composition and I had a really good eye for what is good design.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. Like this is going to be my thing, and literally I just spent all day, every day in front of that app and, Photoshop, especially, honing my skills as a designer, learning new things, going out there on the internet, finding out what others are doing, just continuing to, just really lock it in. And then at one point, I was in the wares rooms, and then another program came my way called Dreamweaver. Or is it not Dreamweaver? No, Front Page.
Oh yeah. Pre Dreamweaver.
Yeah. Front Page, and then I was like, "What's this? Okay, cool." And there was a thing happening called the internet, right? The websites. So I was like, "Oh, wait a minute." So you mean to tell me I could take my art that I've been busting my ass and like honing my skills, I could figure out a way how to publish all this great art that
1,000 people on the internet. No.
Yeah, just kidding. You're right. It's exactly what it was. The internet wasn't at scale yet, right?
Yep.
So this is great. Like this is going to be so much fun. So I got that program. I didn't really understand it at first. So I started basically copying and pasting other people's code and learning what their code was doing. And then I learned a notepad essentially first. And then I was like, all right, cool. Like I understand like what, href, like all these things. I figured out what all these things meant, right? And then I started to make my own websites in Word, in Notepad, and I, put the images into the folders, and before you know it, I created my first website. It was terrible. It was obviously terrible, right?
That was awesome, dude. I did that on GeoCities too. Same thing.
Exactly. Right, exactly. GeoCities, right? Like
way back.
Right, exactly, right? So it was so fun to me. I was like, wait a minute, like the entire world can see what I just did. Like no matter where they are, I could just send them a link to whatever, and they could go see that. Yeah. And it just blew my mind. I was like, this is incredible. Like, and I knew then like the internet was going to be huge, because I was like, this is crazy. Because like at the time, everybody was kind of like, oh, the internet's a fad, it's a fad. It's a fad. That's all you heard. It's a fad. It'll go away.
It's going to go away with Y2K when all the computers crash.
Right, and everybody was like, oh, it's because at the time the predecessor to the internet was CB radios. Right, because it was the way that people communicated, right? And in the 70s and I think the 80s at one point, CB radios were like, like everybody had a CB radio. You could talk to a trucker, and I even fell into that. I got a CB radio. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world because I could talk to my neighbor all night, right? Like super, like like the cheesy 80s movies, the kids with the little like walkie-talkie bed. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought. Right. So and everybody kind of kept saying the internet was the modern day CB radio. Like that's what everybody kind of kept chalking it up to. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. I think this is going to be pretty big. Like I think this is the way people are going to read their news, right? This is the way people are going to consume their news and shop, right? And those things alone, right? Those things alone, I think was enough, right?
Right.
So sure enough. I kept teaching myself how to code and create websites, and obviously continued to hone my design skills, etc. So from there, I was in high school, like I said at that time. And the interesting thing about me, as passionate as I was about web development and art and all these other things, I wasn't passionate about school at all. I just wasn't. I was bored. I was bored. I was bored. I would go to school and be like, why? Like, what is it? I'm learning nothing. I would go to school and literally think I'm learning nothing. I'd be like, this is such a waste of time. But what I really loved about school was the social aspect. Right? I'm a very like, I love people. I love meeting new people. I just love learning about people, listening to their stories, finding out what makes them tick. I love meeting people that are passionate about what they do as well, because that gets me excited about what I do. It's a very it's a very cool thing when you meet somebody who's passionate about whatever they do. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I don't care. Even if they're like they paint houses, like if they're like passionate about painting houses, like cool. I want to hear your story. You probably have a really interesting one.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I took advantage of the social aspect of high school. Like literally, high school was a very, 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 very big high school. So the high school that I went to literally had 1,000 students per grade.
Wow.
Yeah. How many students were in your?
I was homeschooled all the way through, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I think I can get beat then.
Complete opposite, yeah. Yes, you do. That would be a different world for me.
Yeah, exactly. So can you imagine literally walking through your high school and literally seeing new faces you've never seen every day.
Yeah.
It was 4,000 kids in one school. Think about that.
Crazy.
4,000 kids. That's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
It's a lot of freaking kids. And now you could imagine what a administrative nightmare it is to keep track of all these kids, right? 4,000 kids. It's impossible. I don't care how many security guards, how many teachers you have, school aides, whatever. You'll never be able to monitor 4,000 kids. It's impossible. Yeah. So me knowing that, I completely took advantage of that opportunity, right? So as a kid, we had 3 periods of lunch in my school, the school that I went to, 3 periods of lunch. So I figured out, like, okay, and we had these program cards that would tell you where you had to be during the day, what period of class, where you had to be, you know. So first period would be English, second period would be math, you know, third period social studies, and then maybe if you were lucky, fourth period would be lunch, and you'd eat for fourth period, or whatever it may be. The first week of school, what they do is they have you go get a stamp on your program card, and the stamp would say, you know, period. I think it was 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6 was probably lunch, right? So it'd be, well, I can't remember, 3, 4, 5. I don't remember, something like that. Doesn't matter. So anyway, you get a number stamped on your program card that was your period of lunch.
Yeah.
So that way, that's how you get into lunch. Right, and you would show, it would be like your ID to get into lunch, and the security guards or school aides would, okay, you have a 4, cool, it's period 4, you're allowed in. So I figured out very early on, if you just get all 3 stamps on your program card, you're golden, regardless of what period lunch you actually had.
Yeah.
So literally one day we put a good old, you know, distraction play. One of my friends was distracting the school aide, and I went over, I stamp my program card every period, 3, 4, 5, right? So then all I had to do was fold my program card over and show that one number, and I'd get into every period of lunch. So I had the golden ticket, essentially, right? I had 3 periods of lunch. So I figured out I had to literally cut school, like while at school. Who does that? Who cuts school and stays at school? Nice. So weird. But I did it because, like I said, I would get to see all my friends. Yeah. Because all my friends had different periods of lunch. So literally, like, I would, you know, hang out with period 3 lunch, period 4 lunch, right? And then hang out in different areas of the school. My school was kind of like cool. We had an area where you could buy candy, an area where you could play handball. So it was almost like a college kind of setup, because, like I said, there was so many kids. It was like a campus. Yeah. Right. So, like I said, it would be funny. I would hang out with all my friends all those periods of lunch, and then at the time I had just gotten my license, so I was, I guess, 17 years old? Yeah. 16 years old, right? What do you get? You get 16
probably, yeah.
Yeah, so 16. So I just got my license. I would literally do all 3 periods of lunch, and then I'd look at my good friend, Dean, and I'd go, "You ready to go get lunch?" We'd leave the school and go to a deli and get sandwiches. Like, that was my every day. That was my every day. I would show up to school, hang out for 3 periods of lunch, not eat any, like, you know, maybe, you know, if I depending, and then we'd go get lunch, and then we'd go play video games for the rest of the day. Like, that was what I did. And then it caught up with me at one point. One day,
I was gonna say, how'd you maintain grades and parents and all that?
Oh yeah, exactly. So what happened? So this is a great story. So what happened was, one day, the school called my parents, called my house, and my mom picked up. My mom actually, believe it or not, works in a school system, right? So, like, you know, how fucked, right? Like, your son is like ultimate truant, and like your mom works at a school, not my school, but another school, another public school that was, you know, close. So so my mom gets the phone call. Hi, Miss Alson. We'd love to have you come in for a parent teacher with your son's guidance counselor. I didn't even know who my guidance counselor was, right? Like, so I'm like, all right. And she's like, make sure. And they said, make sure to bring Adam, right? I'm like, oh shit, right? So they bring me. So my mom's like, all right, we got this appointment, and now my mom had to take off work, so she was mad already. Right? Yeah. I take off. She's like, it better not be bad, right? I'm like, oh man. I'm like, well, I'm thinking to myself, I'm definitely not getting student of the year, right? Like, it's definitely not going that direction. So literally, we get to the school, we get to the guidance counselor's office, and the first thing is she sits my mother down, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, this is not going to be good. I'm like, I'm just hoping it's not. I'm like, maybe I could put a spin on it.
The ultimate salesman,
right? I'm like, maybe I could put a spin on this some way. So the guidance counselor just blows me out of the water. So, Mrs. Alson, we want to let you know, none of your son's teachers even knows what he looks like. Yeah, there was no spin.
There was no coming back from that.
There was no spin. Like, I'm like, all right.
Oh,
right?
my
I'm like,
God.
You're so there's no coming back from that one. And my mother literally just I'll never forget it. Like there's these moments in your life that you have that you just never forget. They're burned into your brain forever. And this is one of those moments. And she just looks at me and she just mouths to me like, "You're dead." Like she mouthed it to me. I knew exactly what she was saying. Like she might as well have screamed it, but she mouthed it. But I knew, I was like, "Oh my God, like this is not going to go well, right? this is I'm dead. I'm completely dead." My mother was so pissed. Like, because now not only is she taking off work, now I've embarrassed her, right? And my mother does not like to be embarrassed, right? So again, so the school year was pretty much over at that point. So they basically said to my mother, "Your son's got two choices. He's going to have to repeat his sophomore year at the time, or he's gonna, or he can go get his GED." Right. Those were my two options.
Wow.
Right. So I like I said, I was unhappy going into school every day. I felt like I wasn't learning anything. I was just kind of bored. I was bored in class, literally.
Right.
Right. And so I said to my parents, I said, maybe it's a good idea if I just go get my GED, because wasting another year doesn't sound like a good idea to me. You know,
Yeah.
It just didn't sound like what, because
Good
I'm
use
just
of time. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to fall back into my old habits. Like, you know what I mean? If you're disinterested, and that's the thing, right? If you're disinterested in anything, like, just stop.
It's impossible
like, what are you doing?
to learn. Yeah.
You're wasting your time.
Yep. Yeah.
If it's not like sucking you in, if that's not what you're all about, like, you're wasting your time. Like, what do you move on? Find something that you actually care about and you're interested in and you want to learn more about, right? So that's my thing. And at the time, like I said, I was so enthralled with the world of computers and the idea of design and, media creation. Like, that was where I was passionate, and that's where I wanted to spend my time. So I said, you know what, let me go do the GED. It was so funny. They literally sent me to GED class, which I thought was funny, because I'm like, I didn't go to school to begin with, and now you're going to try to send me back to a class, like a GED class? And I didn't go to that either. I went to it. I went to it once, and just to see what it was about. And I was like, I can't, like, what is this? This is ridiculous, again, because they would just give you a book and you would read the book. And I'm like, I could do this at home. Right. So I was like, all right, I'm not coming back here. So then we had the test that came up. I went and I did the test, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with one of these tests, but they're like a 6-hour test. Yeah. They're super long tests. They're honestly, more than anything, they're like mental toughness tests. It's it's just things where you're like, oh, I'm going stir crazy sitting at this desk for 6 hours. Like, you're like, and it's more than anything, like I said, it's a mental toughness test to see if you're going to sit through that thing and actually read through it. Because at one point you're just like, whatever, C. Like, I could see somebody doing that. Like, getting can't do this anymore. Like, let me get out of here, right? And leave a chance, kind of thing. Whatever. I took the test. I ended up passing, thankfully, without even going to high school or going to GED's class, which is funny to me. So
yeah, I completely understand. I was homeschooled and I barely graduated with like a lot of because there's like state tests and stuff you still have to take, and like with the help of my mom, I barely graduated. I'm not academic in any stretch of the imagination, especially back then. Now, I mean, like, I agree with you. I love learning, and I mean, I can learn anything I want in a weekend, basically. I can learn it instantly, but only if I'm interested.
Only if you're into it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're into it, you'll put in the time.
Exactly.
Right? That's what it really comes down to. I mean, it's got to hit you. It's got to hit you. Otherwise, you're just not going to take to it.
So obviously, I would say probably like me, no college.
Well, that's another funny story.
Yeah.
Again, my parents were in kind of denial, right? And they're like, "Well, you got your GED now, so you're going to go to college, right?" So I'm like,
no.
Sure. I'm like, sure, because you don't want to disappoint your parents, right? Like you do anything to appease them, right? So of course, we attempted that, right? So my dad literally took me to the local SUNY school, which is the only kind of school I can get into with a GED.
Yeah.
So they took me to that school. I enrolled, and I was going to be my major would have been computer science, which was the closest thing that they had on the menu to what I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
But computer science really isn't what I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't have media courses at the time.
Right.
They didn't have design courses. They didn't have, because this is 1996, 1997. This is super early days. Like honestly, if there was a course to be taught at that time, I would have been the guy teaching it, because I probably knew more than any professor was in the space at the time.
Yeah.
So I said, I remember telling my dad, so I don't think this is a good idea, right? I don't think it's a good idea for me to go to college. And he was like, well, why do you say that? And I said, well, I didn't go to high school.
Fair argument.
Right? I'm like, and now, like, you're asking what? Like, you're thousands of dollars in tuition, right? To go, and so now you're asking me, to double down on something that I just wasn't good at to begin with. Yeah. You're asking me to double down on a bad hand, basically, right? Because now I'm gonna now the money is there, and I think maybe my parents thought because the money is there, I'm gonna go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. It's not that
motivate you at that age, that's for sure. Not necessarily.
Exactly, especially because you haven't figured out the value of a dollar yet. You're still too young.
Right.
So I at the time, like I said, I was creating these websites for my friends, because who else am I creating websites for, right? Like, I was just doing it just to do it because I loved it, and I created this website of like me and all my dopey friends. Like, literally, it would. I don't know if you remember, but there was something called slam books back in the day. You see, you didn't go to school, so you might not know these.
Yeah.
You heard of a slam book? Okay.
Heard of it, but no, I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Okay, so kids, I don't know if there was like an East Coast thing or a West Coast thing, or where, like, I don't know where they materialized from, but I remember as a kid they had these things called slam books, and it was like a book that would go around, and in every page it would essentially be a survey, right? And it would ask you stupid questions, right? Have you ever been arrested, right? Have you ever smoked weed? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Like, and it'd be yes or no questions, or who's your favorite band? What year were you born? Like, there'd be some basic questions in there too, like who's your secret crush or whatever. Like, just who's the first person you kissed, right? Whatever. Like, dopey questions that 16-year-olds would ask, right? In a book. Or maybe even younger too, right? And again, I don't know where this materialized. Maybe it was just in my school. I doubt it though.
Yeah.
But I thought these slam books were really funny, because like you'd go through them, and some of the answers would be really funny, and you would learn a lot about your friends that you may not have had thought to ask these questions, right? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this slam book idea and I'm going to put it online. Like, this was my idea as a kid. So I said, I found like 10 of my friends, and I said, give me all the answers on a piece of paper to these and I'll put it online. And I said, let me know your favorite song. And give me a picture. Or at the time, I was using this thing called Snappy. It would take video and turn it into stills, because scanners were too expensive at the time. Yeah. So I'd Snappy a photo of a friend and put it on this website and whatever. And then it would be this slam book stuff. It'd be all the questions that were asked there, and you could go through all these profiles. Like, so it would be like me, like my friend Pat, right? Like all my stupid friends, right? So, and then on top of it, when you click in, like, it would have like terrible MIDI music playing of their favorite song, like Smashing Pumpkins and like music.
I know. That was the worst audio ever.
It was hysterical. It was so much, but it was so much fun. And before you know it, other friends of my friends would see it and be like, "Oh my God, put me on there, put me on there, put me on there." And all my friends wanted to be on this thing. And stupid me, I'm like thinking to myself, like, like, okay, like, people obviously want this. But I'm like, well, I wonder if there's people out there that would pay me to do this, right? So then my entrepreneurial tendency kicked in again, right?
Yeah.
Came back. My old money making ways, like, and having fun. I'm like, okay, how do I marry the two? How do I turn this into something, right? And I kind of sat on it. And at the time, again, this is 1997. There was nothing. There was no city search. Google wasn't around yet, right? Like, Yahoo, I think, was around. Alta Vista was around. But there was nothing local. There was nothing on the internet that was local at all. At all. There was no – I mean, if there was, it was, local guys creating it. It was just no big conglomerates had jumped into the space at the time. Mm-hmm. So immediately saw that opportunity. I said, you know what? I said, my dopey friends won't pay me money to do this, but I go, maybe local businesses will, you know? And I'm like, what if I created, instead of like a friend directory, what if I created a local online business directory of all my local businesses in the area? Which in hindsight was probably the worst idea. I should have kept going with friends. I could have been the Facebook. I could have been Zuckerberg.
Yep.
Right?
No kidding.
All my friends wanted to be online. I should have figured that. I should have put that two together. But I mean, the market wasn't matured enough to support a social media network at the time. No way.
Yeah.
This was the lower hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
The idea to do a local online business directory. So at the time, my dad was a vice president of a paper company. He was the pretty much the stud sales guy of his firm. My father has, in addition to being an amazing artist as well, like, I mean, my dad blows me out of the water. I mean, he's a brilliant artist. Amazing. I think somebody's ringing my doorbell.
Do you need to get that? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Amazon?
No,
I'm just kidding.
That's exactly. No, you're right. It's exactly what it is. I ordered a mat for some art that I got. And, sorry about that. I'm assuming you can cut this out.
Yeah,
right?
no, you're good.
So where was I? My dad. So yeah, in addition to being a salesman, my dad was an amazing artist as well. As a matter of fact, he was my main influence to start doing art, because I would go through all of his art books.
Wow.
I'd be like, wow, this is incredible. Like, this is so cool. How does he do this? You know, like that was a mind blowing, kind of experience as well, to see that my dad could draw like that. So I was like, maybe I could draw.
Yeah.
Right. So that was one of the things that got me going. But getting back to where I was with this idea that I had, I went to my dad and I told him, I said, instead of going to college, I think I have this, this idea. And he said, all right, well, what's your idea? I remember sitting again, you have these moments in life and you just never forget. And sitting at the kitchen, he was sitting at the kitchen table. And I said, I think I want to create a local online business directory for Staten Island businesses. That's where I grew up in Staten Island, New York. And he looked at me, he goes, you thought of this idea? like I stole it from somebody, right? And
Yeah.